Judiciary Committee hearing, FBI Director Kash Patel revealed that the agency has been looking into a number of individuals who received communication related to Charlie Kirk's assassination from the suspected shooter through a chat thread on Discord, a popular messaging platform among gamers. When Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri noted that as many as 20 users were on the thread, Director Patel corrected him, saying it's a lot more than that. While a spokesman for Discord says they found no evidence that the suspect planned the assassination on their platform nor promoted violence, this is not the first time that the world of online gaming has intersected with real-world violence. So the question is worth exploring. Is there a connection, or is it just coincidence? Joining me now to discuss this is Reagan Rose, founder of the media ministry Redeeming Productivity. He formerly served as director of digital platforms for Grace to You, the media ministry of the late John MacArthur. Reagan, welcome to Washington Watch. Thanks for joining us.
It's great to be here, Tony.
First, I think it's important to note that when we speak of gaming here, our focus is on these shooter games, not necessarily traditional games. Even then, some may think those games are harmless and don't carry over into the real world. But even the military would probably say otherwise, right?
Yeah, there's a long history, actually. Most people don't realize this, a long history of the military using video games for training. I think most of us know that they would use flight simulators for those types of things, but even first-person shooter type games, they've been using as far back as the 90s. There was an old game, some people might remember, Doom. It was Doom 2. The military took it and they called it Marine Doom, and they would train scenarios on this old computer game, and they've been doing that ever since. Even in the early 2000s, the Army put out their own game, America's Army, which they used for training, and they actually put it out to the public and used it for recruitment as well. So there's been a long-term cooperation between gaming and the military.
Yeah, some of it crosses over into some of the black operations and dark side of the military, the Department of Defense, going back in the 80s and 90s, even before, as they worked through DARPA, one of these defense research entities. But let's talk about, I know a lot of parents, they may not, why are my kids down in the basement playing those games? Some of these games are not harmless. There is a desensitizing that takes place in these games, but there's more than that, because if I recall correctly, Rose, back in I think it was after in the Snowden files that were released, that the CIA, the FBI, the various intelligence organizations were going into these gaming chat rooms, and they were looking for suspects that might be involved in real world violence.
Yeah, they were doing that. British intelligence as well. We know that as far back as 2008, they all had programs looking into what conversations were happening on these platforms. And I think the idea was that the people were taking advantage of these non-traditional communication platforms to almost hide in plain sight, recruit, plan terrorist activity or otherwise nefarious things. And the military realized there was this whole area that they weren't paying attention to.
So one of the shell casings that law enforcement found had a sequence of various arrows. That combination appears to be, I'm told, a direct nod to Helldivers 2, a cooperative shooter where players use button codes to trigger support actions. So what do we know? How deeply does it appear that Tyler was involved in the gaming world?
Yeah, it seems like he was a highly online person, as you might say. Definitely with the memes and, like you mentioned, the bullet casings, and that is the arrow key reference is a reference, they believe, to Helldivers 2, a combination you would do to call in an airstrike in the game. But I think also his use of Discord, which you mentioned as well, that it's not only gamers use that, but that platform for chat is very popular in the gaming community. And some of those corners of the internet can get quite dark. I mean, I know from my own experience past being very deep in the gaming world myself, there's a lot of conversations, a lot of attempts to be edgy, a lot of the things that are on the fringes of society are discussed there more openly, because I think there's this sense of cooperation, this sense of we're all sort of in our own little corner. And I think a lot of antisocial tendencies are cultivated in the gaming world that people that are outside of that world don't realize just how dark it can be.
And there's been some efforts to try to keep minors out of these areas, and that's raised a lot of opposition from from those on the left. But there's concern because young people, minors, have been sucked into this.
Yeah, unfortunately, even with rules there might be around social media, for example, right now, unfortunately, I think it's too low of an age that you have to be above 13 to get an account for social media. That hopefully will change in the future to raise the age. But even with video games and the rating system, it's more like a recommendation than anything that's enforced. Even with some of the most hardcore games, you can easily get around that even as a child.
So do these games, some have raised this question. I'm of the opinion that it does, but what evidence is there that these games desensitize people to violence?
Yeah, it's always a tricky question because, going back, I remember after the Columbine massacre, this discussion came up, and it's very frequent that after a mass shooting, there does seem to be some gaming-related things. And I know the American Psychological Association has come out twice saying that they don't see a causal relationship between video game violence and real world violence.
Well, let me say,
that's not the only way it could be connected.
So let's talk about that because why would the military's using it and has been using it to make soldiers, Marines, more proficient in their occupation, which is to kill, blow things up. I mean, how is it not affecting young people?
Yeah, I think that's well observed because the very fact that they're using these things for training assumes that they believe there is some transferability. There's some way you're going to be able to take what you've trained on the game and use it in real life. And so I think that the connection is closer than most people are willing to look at. And I think the word you used earlier is probably the right line to think about it. It's desensitizing. And it's tremendously anti-socializing as well if you get very deep into these gaming communities.
I remember when Tipper Gore, that was Al Gore's wife when he was vice president, took on Hollywood and how movies in Hollywood were desensitizing young people to violence, and that's a whole different level. That's like going from one dimension to three dimensions when you get into the video. And I mean, even in my time in the Marine Corps in training. The exposure to we didn't have the video games, but we had videos, training of combat situations, actual footage designed to, I think it was designed to not necessarily desensitize, but to prepare you for those types of scenarios and situations so that it was not the first time you saw all of this. And it does have a desensitizing effect. Maybe that's not the purpose, but it does because it becomes familiar. And when something becomes familiar, you become desensitized to it. Maybe not totally, but especially when you're in the gaming world, and I'll have to confess, I've never played. You want to talk about Pac-Man? I played Pac-Man, maybe Space Invaders, one of those. But so I've never played those other games. But I can imagine that as you play those games and people are killed and they're died, you blow things up, but then you walk away from it. It is much different than real life, and I think it desensitizes you to the actual element of death and destruction.
And I think that there's a difference with video games too, besides just watching. Maybe someone who's a fan of slasher films or something, that's desensitizing to watch that horrific stuff. But I think it's a layer deeper when you are participating in it, even though it's pretend, it's a simulation, but the immersiveness and the fact that it's you carrying out those things, it's not you as an observer, it's you acting it out, I think is a level of participation in the violence that is even more desensitizing.
Yeah, I would think so.
Closer to reality.
You're absolutely right, because you're not just watching it, you are a participant in it. And You know, the virtual reality is as real as it's become. I mean, you are absorbed into it. You are a part of it. So Reagan, with that in mind, what is your advice to parents who have children that may be playing these sort of games, or, you know, have a foot in the online gaming communities? Because I think the frame of reference for many parents is going to be those, you know, video arcade games that they played when they were younger, usually with pocket change. This is something much different.
It is, and I think a lot of parents are ill prepared for it. Even ones that grew up with video games, even as short as 10 years ago, the games were radically different in terms of the addictive quality of them. This is a massive thing. You see kids playing video games for longer stretches of time than ever before, and that's a deliberate move by the video game creators to make the games more addicting. Why? Because they now have subscription revenue they can get from it, advertising revenue, microtransactions where you buy, you know, different weapons or different skins for your character. And so the longer they get you playing, the more money they make. So it's a natural incentive for them to create as addicting of a game as possible.
So how do they do that? I mean, this is not just, they're not shooting from the hip on this. They're using data that they have gleaned from people being online to hold them there longer, right?
Exactly. And even when I was researching for my book on this, a lot of them researched casinos. What was it that made casinos so addicting, casino games, and to emulate some of those same reward systems to sort of hack your psychology into making you want to keep coming back for that dopamine hit.
What should parents be looking for as warning signs?
Yeah, I think the easiest factor to look for is the amount of time spent on the games. That's when you're going to notice the addiction pattern that, you know, people can play video games in moderation. Some people are more wired for it to be addicting than others. I'd pay close attention to the content of the games. Some of the games that are out there are horrific. You think of the Grand Theft Auto series, you talk about acting out wicked things. That's what you're doing in those games. You're the one beating people up with a baseball bat with wanton disregard. So look how much time they're spending, look at what the content of the games are, and look what happens when you try to take the games away, when you try to cut them off. I think the reaction of children, of students, to when you try to remove the games will show you just how attached they are to them. And that can be a warning sign that you should pay attention to.
So let's talk, we just have a couple minutes left, Reagan. Let's talk for just a moment about the spiritual nature of this. I mean, some of the things you've been describing, I mean, there's no redemptive purpose in that. Is this is this demonically designed to entrap our children?
I think so. I mean, you can see the natural incentives from the game developers, but if you just look at video games, how they are now, from the perspective of, you know, if you were Satan, could you come up with a way to waylay the natural desire for young men to seek out achievement in this world, to exercise dominion, right? To fulfill their call as creatures from God. If you could find a way to hijack our natural desire for fellowship and move it into a fake online world where we're disconnected from our bodies, if you could find a way to basically mollify these natural good desires for us want to achieve, to overcome, and to fellowship, and relegate us to a corner where we can't really make an influence on society, where we can't glorify God in the real world, this is what I would come up with if that was my task. And so I think that there really is a demonic element to it. And again, I'm not trying to say that all video games are evil or no one should play them, but I think we need to be much more cautious than we are.
Chris, we just have about 25 seconds left. Where can people find more about your book?
Yeah, the book and everything else I do is available at redeemingproductivity.com.
All right, Reagan, thanks so much for joining us. Great insight today. Thank you.
Good talking with you, Tony.